Thank you, Audra, and thanks for having me. I have to tell you, I enjoy getting kind of back into doing some speaking and sharing with my fellow driver educators some of the great things that I've had the opportunity to learn over about 30 years. And so now it's an opportunity to kind of say, let's pay it back and give it back to my friends and fellow workers in driver education. I started doing this presentation probably about, oh, I don't know, probably about 10 years ago. And in the process of doing it, it's been reformed or refined, excuse me, to be what it is today. I have to tell you that I did not realize how serious it was for me to be able to have a liability portfolio just to make sure that I didn't expose myself to a high level of liability and risk. And so hopefully I can give you some insights and ideas on what you can do to reduce your exposure. Now, some of you have already heard this before, or this presentation before, so it might be some new things come up. But what I want you to do is, if something comes up, take a screenshot of it for your own benefit, so that you can kind of see what's put it away for something for a little bit later. Okay. So I wanted to start off first with driver ed perspectives. And the reason I wanted to start off with perspectives is that we need to get a really good look at where things are from our particular level down here at about the 500-foot level, all the way up to the national level where it's at the 20,000-foot level. And it needs to, and we need to make sure that we fully understand that there are requirements and expectations for people at each one of these levels. And some of the things that are happening at the 20,000-foot level are those things that filter down to you that you kind of have to do in order to continue to work in traffic safety education. I do want to make a couple of disclaimers. First of all, I am not an attorney, nor do I play one on TV. And therefore, this is considered advice to professionals, not in the terms of legal advice, but in practical things that you can do to really protect your assets. Okay, so here's the perspective. If we were to take a look at this, there is a guy by the name of Istvan Banye. I want you to all go out and buy his book if you have grandkids or kids. And I want you to sit down with them and I want you to go through the book, because it's an exciting book and all it has is illustrations. And it shows you how all of these illustrations are connected. So here's the book again. There we go. So we'll start off with this little bumpy things, look like maybe a road sign or something like that. But if we take a step back, what do we see? We see a rooster with a comb and with a wattle, and we see this beautiful multicolored eye, and we see the hackles on its neck and how beautiful they are. If we back up just a little bit further, what we see is, wait, there's a couple of kids looking at the rooster. So they're studying it from that particular perspective. Sometimes this is like us as a traffic safety educators, where we are looking at our job. Look, I just want to get into cars with kids and I just want to drive. Leave me alone. Don't have me do anything else. I see my purpose, and that is to teach the concepts that my kids need to know so they can drive safely on the roadway. That's all well and good, and that's kind of what we see at this particular level. Okay, but back up a little bit further, and now we've got like the administrator looking at it and saying, okay, I need these things from you. Here's some new curriculum that you can work on, that sort of stuff. And I'm going to hand it and pass it down to you. So the instructor, the administrator, has to go through the barnyard and walk up to you where you're doing your job. But let's go a little bit further. Let's kind of go way back out here. And what we see, this is kind of Audra's. It's not a likeness of Audra because I don't think she has black hair. But I will tell you, this is where Audra's looking at all the pieces in the state of Utah. And she has above her all of the things that are going on at the national level in traffic safety education. And so her perspective is different. Guess what? She's going to help you with things that are going to make your job different and more safe. And I just want you to really consider that you have that you have a lot of responsibility, but we need to think of it in terms of that it's layered. It goes up to different people in different situations who have different responsibilities. Now, sometimes the people at 20,000-foot level don't quite get it, so our job is to educate them. Sometimes the people at the 500-foot level don't get it, and that's the administrator's job to educate them. The point is this, is that it's not just one perspective, and it's not just one thing that we can do as educators. Here's the last one. Okay, now you kind of see there's a hand up in the upper right-hand corner. It turns out it's a young boy holding a magazine, a toy magazine. So there you go. So we're going to talk a little bit about what is liability, and we're also going to talk about a liability portfolio and why do I need one, and then the issue of feasance. What is feasance? So what I'd like you to do in chat is I would like you to put down, what do you think liability is? Okay. So I got to find my chat function here, because when I go to this way, it kind of reacts weird. There we go. So would you put it in there? Type it in there. Type it in there what you think liability is. Go. I think one's responsibility is good. Thanks, Troy. Keep going. I know, well, let's see. It's 10 o'clock here, so I'm thinking it's 11 o'clock there. You're probably famished. You want to get out and have some lunch. Financially responsibility, being responsible by law. Excellent, excellent. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay, we get the idea. It's responsibility, okay? So the first thing we want to take a look at is, sometimes we get in a situation where it's like, wait, the driver ed teacher has asked at the school board meeting that the exemptions from the ban on prayer during school-sponsored activity. I was going to write a song one time, a country western song, and it was basically this: I found Jesus in an intersection sitting in my driver ed car. Sometimes we get the stuffing scared out of us because some of the things that we're involved in put us at risk, and also put us at being responsible for the actions of that student and ourselves. Okay, so liability, know where you stand. That's really important. We need to know where we stand. Where do we stand as driver educators? And hopefully you'll get a look at that today. I want you to do this. This is kind of an exercise I have everybody do when I do a presentation like this. I want you to ask yourself the following: would I be embarrassed to do this in front of a judge? Okay. Or how about this? Well, Your Honor, it's kind of like, here, hold my beer. Watch this. Okay. Or would I be embarrassed to see it published about in a newspaper? I have won numerous awards as a driver educator and a national consultant in traffic safety. My name's been published in a newspaper a lot. And you know what? It thrills me to have my name published in a newspaper. It does not thrill me to see my fellow educators sometimes who have untoward affairs with their teens, or they're just doing stupid stuff. So I don't want to read about that with my own name. Or look at your spouse, your children, home, RV, pension, or whatever, and ask yourself if you really want to lose those things. So here we go. I don't want you to suffer from what I refer to as the ID10T problem. Every once of us have an ID10T problem, but not always. But some of us may function this way. But if we put them together, you can kind of figure out what it says. Don't have an ID10T problem. Make sure you do your work and you do it well and you do the things you're supposed to, and you will never have one of these situations pop up. The role of the driver educator is that you have a performance and a behavior that's expected of you. So you have to evaluate what a driver can do and what a driver can actually do, or actually does, excuse me. And that's pretty important in this day and age. I've got to be the one who evaluates what's going on with the driver. And then the performance actions, what should have been known? Did the driver education, did the student know how to perform an unprotected left-hand turn? And did you know how to intervene if they began to go early and almost pull in front of a car? What could have been done? So effective learning versus trial and error. I got to tell you, the second part I said trial and error, it's learning by accident. And I got to tell you, that's not a good term that I like to use when I'm working with driver educators. So first of things that we need to do is we need to do a pre-assessment. We have to pre-assess what the student's ability is so that we don't exceed that ability and get ourselves in trouble. I'll give you an example. I was teaching a kid how to do precision right and left turns in a neighborhood. And we go out into the road, we make a couple of turns, and we're doing 35 miles an hour, and she's supposed to turn into this neighborhood. Well, we're going along, and I realize she's not slowing down. So I apply the brake, help slow down. But then she makes a turn and just continues to turn and almost into this big metal set of mailboxes. Well, quickly I grabbed a hold of that, pulled the wheel around, got her off of target on that, and said, "So tell me what's going on." And the kids in the back seat said, "Well, she's only driven 45 minutes." And so it's like, I should have known that. I should have looked at the paperwork. But in my hubris, I didn't do a pre-assessment. I thought, shoot, it's not a problem. This is an easy gig today. So we tried right and left turns, and I realized she wasn't getting the idea of being able to look into the turn down to her target. And so it was one of the things that we crept back to the high school, and the next 15, 20 minutes we spent driving in the parking lot, working on looking into turns, steering into turns, and correcting when we reached the apex or the transition peg. And then the other thing is planned learning activities. We have to have a plan. He who doesn't plan plans to fail. And you need to really take a look at it. I need to take a look at, what are my plans? What do I have written down in my lesson plan book for each one of these activities that we're going to do? And have I even read through my lesson plan in the last several years? Okay. The other thing is simple to complex, procedure to process. We need to know that we teach something from simple to complex. Those of you that teach skiing at school and that sort of thing as well, you don't put them down up on the diamond chair immediately when you're working on teaching skiing. No, you want them to get down on the bunny slope and then work their way up and eventually get to the diamond chair. And then the other thing is procedure to process. And that's where we step by step tell them how to execute a particular maneuver. Like for instance, when they're doing a precision right-hand turn, we have them line up properly. We describe where they're supposed to line up. We have them stop properly. We have them creep forward to the edge of the roadway so the front of the car is in line with that. And then they can begin their turn. And we just talk through all of these different processes or procedures that have to happen. What happens the next time they have a lesson with you and they're going to do precision right-hand turns? We turn it over to process because they've already had the skill set. Now, we may initially cue, but after we've done that, as they're practicing through those turns, we can evaluate and see how well they're doing. Okay. So continued symptom recognition. This is pretty important. We're the doctors of traffic safety education. We have to take a look at what the students are doing and what are the problems. And what that requires of you as the doctor is that you need to know your stuff. And then you need to know whom you're stuffing. And then you need to stuff them well. It's the taxidermy model of teaching. We have to know our stuff. If we don't know our stuff, how will we know when students are doing it well, except by what we feel or what we sense, etc. And then we prescribe solutions. And that's where we go back to telling them, remember, You started your turn before you were in the proper forward position. Let's try it again. And all of a sudden, they can fix that problem and begin doing their precision right-hand turns effectively. Okay? Do we have guided versus unguided practice? And guided practice is where I take them step by step through a lesson and go over it. And then I may give them an unguided experience at the very last lesson so they can show me that they can get us back to school. Honestly, it's not a lot of unguided experience, because the minute I turn that over to the student, I have exposed myself to a certain amount of liability. So all of those things, this is a list of what we just covered, but I want to tell you, I want to ask you the question, which reduces your liability? Which one reduces your liability? And it's a tough one, but I want to encourage you to think in terms of all of those things, at least in some form, reducing your liability. If you were to pick one that that would reduce your liability the most, what do you think it would be? Type it in chat, please. Yeah, guided versus guided. Thanks, Troy. What else? Yeah, Audra says, yeah. Oh, well, yeah, no kidding. And same with James Jaramillo, all of them. Good. You know, I will tell you that each one of them has a contributing factor. It's like a house of cards. You pull one out and all of a sudden it comes tumbling down. And the big issue here associated with this is that we have to do them all. Otherwise, we will expose ourselves to liability, and we don't want that. Okay, let's get back over here. So here's our liability in our definition, and it's pretty simple. It is liability means legal responsibility for your acts or omissions. And it says both of those things. And the reason it says both of those things is because sometimes we do something and it exposes us to liability. Other times we forget to do things and, oh, wait, that exposes us to liability as well. Okay. Proof of negligence are some things that you need to take a look at. They are things like predictability. It was what I was doing or what the student doing, was it predictable? You know, and if it was there a way for me to intervene to provide reasonable response and care? And in the whole process, when we're looking at the lesson, the causation issues, did I cause this negligent action to occur? And what would I be held responsible? And then there's something about, we usually hear it in tort liability, which is a civil wrong or wrongful act, whether intentional, accidental, from which injury occurs to another. Torts include all negligent cases as well as intentional wrongs which result in them. We're going to learn something about feasance, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But what I want to get to is I want to talk about a kid named Austin Hanifer. Some of you may have known him or about him up in Idaho. I know Audra did, and I didn't realize she was smack in the middle of the whole thing when she took over traffic safety, the head of the traffic safety department in Idaho. But it's a very sad story, but it shows us that if we'd have done our job right, there wouldn't have been a problem. And this is feasance. We have obligations. Okay. He's from Cary, Idaho. I was a kid, and I would assume he's about 14 years old at the time of the crash. And because they can start driving at 14, and I'm sure in some rural counties in Utah, you can drive at the age of 14. I'm guessing, Audrey, you may need to step in here and say something. But the situation, here it is. There's a driver and a teacher with two students in the car. The student was on his second drive. Okay, so 14 years old and second drive. Oh, great, it's 15 in Utah. Thank you, Audra. Second drive. So how many, if you were to look at the drives of your kids and their second drive and they'd never really driven much before, what do you think? Would they really have a lot of skills that they can work with and be able to drive? Okay. The student driver was instructed to practice turnabout maneuvers. And turnabout maneuvers, it's like pulling into a space across the road, backing up, and go the opposite direction. Because sometimes when you're in rural Utah, you get stuck and you need to say, you know what, I'm going the wrong direction. I got to turn around. So it's a good maneuver to have. But it was done on an icy highway. It was at morning dusk. It had limited line of sight. And the highway was 65 miles an hour. Okay, so you got a 14-year-old on a 65-mile-an-hour highway practicing turnabouts. Oh my goodness. This is in daytime. This is where the crash occurred. And what you would see is you see this coming this way, turning into this space, backing into here, and going back the other direction. Okay. I don't have a picture of it looking the other direction. But what I did is I dimmed it down because it was morning dusk. And what if the person driving the car was not using their daytime running lights or even their headlights? Would you be able to see that person while you're doing these things, especially as a 14-year-old teen looking and not really knowing all the things like about 360 scan, shift reverse, look in both directions, etc. Well, what happened was the car was struck by another vehicle, and that vehicle, Austin, was killed. He was obviously struck on the driver's side, and he was killed. The teacher was injured badly, and the girl in the back seat had a fractured pelvis, which is also injured badly. I'm just telling you. Okay, so the family decides, okay, I'm going to sue the teacher and the school district because I think they were negligent in doing what they were doing. And so they said he practiced 3-point turns on an icy highway. They were willful and reckless. And then guess what? The jury deliberated 90 minutes. And I'll tell you, there's two things that can happen with a 90-minute deliberation. One, the jury's going to come back and say, not a problem. He's not guilty. Or two, we're going to hang him. Okay? So they found him 100% liable for causing the crash and the death of Austin Hennifer. 100% liable. Now, I don't know about you, but I never want to be 100% liable in any situation, because what it means is I didn't do my job. I didn't pull my stuff together. So let's talk about Jeffrey Meacham. We can talk about him because his name was in the paper. So I'm not violating any trust or anything of that nature. Jeffrey Meacham didn't keep records of student progression or driving ability. In other words, he hadn't really written down any notes about, good stops, good starts, nice balance, keeping the vehicle in balance, doing things like keeping lane position, proper speed control, all those things. They were not written in a file that could have been found in the teacher's classroom, so that he could show that, yes, he was ready for that maneuver. He didn't pre-assess the student's driving ability to perform the maneuver in a low-risk environment. What I would like you to do is in the chat, would you put a place to suggest where a low-risk environment might be to practice this turnabout? Let's go. I'll give you just about a minute. Go, 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 go. Type, type, type. Yeah, residential areas. Thanks, Rob. That's true. Parking lot. Thanks, Richard. Church parking lot. That was mentioned yesterday. The church parking lot. You have churches throughout Utah, and they are empty on the weekdays, usually. Okay. Residential streets, lots, small lots. Absolutely. Those kinds of things, remember, are the simple to complex. And that's where you can do the procedure to process in a simple environment so that the student can be able to show you they have the ability to do this. And once they've done that, and after Austin had done a drive or two more, then they could have gone out on that day and practiced that turnabout maneuver, because now he's demonstrated it, and we don't have to really worry about whether we're going to run into problems. He also didn't have lesson plans for instruction in classroom and behind the wheel. Oh my goodness. Did you know that lesson plans are a legal document that can be subpoenaed from you by the state or by a court of law in the case of something that you may have in what you may have done that caused injury. And they also didn't have a grade book or attendance records. My goodness, we can't just mail it in. We've got to have this information. Again, this is a legal document. They can subpoena it from you. And if you don't have the accurate information on if the kid's been in your class and they've done this well on their particular lessons, then you are going to be held liable for not doing your job. And you could possibly be fired. All right. So the family learns after that 90-minute deliberation that they were awarded $3.5 million. So, but here's what I want to ask you a question. Would the family rather have Austin back or $3.5 million? My guess is that they want their son back. And they did this simply to show punitive action against somebody who was irresponsible and liable for the actions of their child's death. All right, so let's talk about feasance. Feasance are laws and regulations that we have to obey, and if we choose not to obey them, then we are guilty of one level of feasance. Procedures and practice. I would strongly suggest that each of your jurisdictions put together a policy manual that lists the procedures of like a parent night and a correspondence and all those kinds of things that that show what you're required to do when you take driver education in your program. Performance or responsibility or task. I have to perform at a level that's way up here. You know why? Because I'm more trained than the parents and probably more trained than a lot of people in the community. And so I would suggest that we have to do our task, do it well. And then performance of standard or procedure. Why do you think Audra pushes so hard for standards? Why do you think she pushes so hard for you to have a curriculum that's consistent with the standards that are national standards? It's because there's an issue of liability if you don't do it right. And then what are the basis? And that's where we get into the curriculum. So malfeasance. A lot of people use the term malfeasance, but don't really know what's going on. But it's an intentional doing something either legally or morally wrong. Malfeasance would be things like allowing a violation of standards, speeding, no seatbelts. Well, duh, that they are responsible. One of the things that's really tough to continue to police, especially when you're looking forward, is making sure the kid in the back seat keeps their safety belt on, because you know they're little worms sometimes. They just decide they want to see if you can catch them at it, and so keep checking. Not providing minimum instruction. You know, you have so many hours that you have to have classroom, so many hours that you have to have behind the wheel instruction, and so many hours that you have observational hours. And if you sign forms that shows competence and that they hadn't completed the minimum number of hours, you have just committed malfeasance. And then Audra came through 2 days ago with her presentation about what's required in a car. If you choose not to have those things in your car, you are guilty of malfeasance. Because if you just purposely say, I don't need flares, or I don't need a fire extinguisher, or I don't need a bloodborne pathogen kit, whatever, then you're going to be practicing what we call malfeasance, okay? The next one's misfeasance, as opposed to Mr. Feasance. And it's responsibility in which there are errors and an unfortunate result through mistake and carelessness, but without evil intent or violation of the law. A lot of things going on in our policing world these days where, some of them have purposefully done something and they are guilty of malfeasance. Some of them have accidentally done something, and that would be misfeasance, okay? But in Oregon, some examples of misfeasance would be teaching to stop inside an intersection for a left turn. And what that means is that Oregon says if you can't get out of the intersection before the light turns red, then you are guilty of violating 811 216, which is failure to obey a traffic control device. And they'll cite you for 200 and some bucks, okay? Or allowing students to sit too close to the airbag. I know we got some little kids that are taking driver education. And so sometimes we need to make sure that they don't sit way up here with the airbag, because that deploys at 200 miles an hour. That's going to break a few facial bones and chest bones, okay? Allowing students or not using headlights when the vehicle's in motion. We have a requirement for traffic safety education that every driver ed car must have their full lights on when they're driving, because it gives you visual of recognition in the front and in the back, okay? Non-feasance is I just don't do it. I choose to say I'm not going to follow it. So he or she's agreed to do something with his or her principal, but the lawful task or non-performance of duty. So this one has always been kind of a fun one. I'm sure that many of you, let's take Southern Utah. It's kind of away from a lot of freeways, towns, etc. And hold on a second. I'm going to kill that. My phone keeps ringing. Sorry. You let them, they're tired. You've been on the road a long day. It's a hot summer day and they want to get a soda so that they can cool off in the car. And so you pull over and you let them go into the store. But your employer says that you're not supposed to do that. So anyway, they enter the store, the vehicle under your control, and your vehicle is stopped by the police officer. And that's because, oh wait, they stole stuff. And so you have to be responsible for making sure that they don't do that, or find a good place to go potty, freshen up, get something cool to drink, and so on. There was a situation in Vermont where a teacher was fueling the vehicle. The kid was remaining at the wheel, had the keys in the car, and decided to, once the person went in to pay for it, locked the door, took off for a little joyride all by themselves. The administrator's son was in the back seat, and so there was all hell to pay because he didn't do his job right. Okay, you disagree with the non-errand policy, but you go, okay, I'm going to go to the bank or get some fast food, and the kid hits the gas and it results in bodily injury. What are your procedures and practices? Get them down so you don't have this mistake. So here's some things for us to consider. You have a highest level of care, and that's Utah has ruled on certain things for Utah teachers. They have come in and they've said, okay, you have a responsibility to do these things with your students. And then there's a little higher level of care, not quite as the highest, Utah teachers. You guys are educated well beyond parents, guardian, general public. So there's a higher level of responsibility. There's also the standard level of care, and that's the general public, parents, and guardian. They can take their kids out driving. Yeah. So I'm sorry, I'm missing some of the chat here. Okay. And then standard level care is the general public, et cetera. Substandard of care. Let's say you can't meet the requirement to do a drive on a freeway. And I'm thinking some people in Eastern Utah might not be very close to a freeway. So if that's the case, you got a long ways to go. So you have to file for an exemption with Audra's office and make sure it's there. But you can have the parents go out and drive with their teens. And then there's a non-standard level of care. Ned Ferris did a presentation on ADAS, and I would venture to say that a lot of you didn't even know what ADAS stood for. And we have new technologies where, AMVA, which is the American Association of Motor Vehicle Administrators. And they're the ones that came out with the ideas that, yes, they can use the rear view camera when they're backing up, but it's not all that they can rely upon. There were several things, but the convenience things such as, I don't know, that park the car by itself, can use those on a drive test. And so those are things that came in, but we don't have standards for those things in traffic safety education. If you look at Learn to Drive or the curriculum you're currently using, it doesn't have any of that because those books were outdated the day they were published. Standards. We have national standards, and I'm just going to buzz through these. You have Utah standards, and a lot of this was determined by traffic and civil statutes, administrative rules, and teacher certification, all part of Audra's work. Approved local curriculum, model curriculum from Utah, and state and local practices. But they affect instructor certification, licensing standards, administrative responsibilities, and your responsibilities. Because now the standards are in place, not to upset you because you have to be beholden to a standard, but because those standards are there to protect you. They are like your mom and dad sitting there and protecting you from exposure to risk. And that's why it's really so important for you to really take those into consideration. I'm going to talk about next about something that's really important, and that was the whole thing, is liability portfolio, how to cover your assets. It's really important to have some of these things, and I'm going to actually give Audra a document that has all of this stuff in it, so you can go through and check to see if you have it. I wish you could see my file cabinet. I have a 4-drawer file cabinet over here, and the middle drawer, the second drawer, excuse me, is just my liability portfolio. It has just my stuff related to conferences, certification, etc., that goes in there to be part of something that I can use to protect me. So here we go. Certification records. Do you have certification records on file? Like, for instance, do you have a teaching license? That's always a good one. Do you have the courses that you took to achieve certification? That's another good one. Okay. And what about approved curriculum guide? Do you have something on file in your school that is the curriculum guide? What are we going to cover? Can you cover how to drive with through the entire drive ed program, or do you have to skip through some of the things? And if so, put them in your curriculum guide. Sample classroom lesson plan. So important. If you don't have something to show that you are systematically educating your students through this stuff, then you are systematically exposing yourself to liability. Same thing with a sample in-car lesson plan. You need to have one. And it just shows that you know, okay, and we're going to cover these things on this particular drive. I think that some of you are going to have exemptions to curriculum plan. You may not be able to accomplish some of the drives that you would like to, simply because you're too far away from it. Let me see. I want to go back to the sample in-car lesson plan, and I want to have something in there that also says a behind the wheel drive route. Okay, I know that is anathema for some of you. It's like, look, I'm living out here. We're going to drive the same roads every day. It's the same thing. I don't need a drive route. And I'm telling you, you need a drive route, and you need to have it on file with the district and with you, so that, and here's why. So let's say you're going to talk about unprotected left-hand turns, and you're going to teach that to your kids, but you don't have a drive route that shows where those things happened and on what day those things happened. It's going to be very easy for you to be exposed to a higher level of liability than you really want to be, especially if the kid's involved in a crash. So the drive route gives you a place where the lesson was taught, a discrete location, and how well the student did on that particular skill that we were trying to teach them. So that's why that's so important. Again, it's something to have in your portfolio. Local practices might be your policy or portfolio, or excuse me, your policy manual that you might have for your school. Resources used, and that's going to be things like what kind of curriculum do we have and what do we use? And you don't have to have a book in there, but a list of that is really a pretty good thing. You could also put in there some of the things that you might have the students do on a YouTube video, especially when we're getting to a point where some of this ADAS stuff is going to become more and more prevalent in the vehicles these kids are driving. Now, these are considerations. You should have a parent meeting. I'm telling you, it's so important to have a parent meeting with your kids. And the reason is because then you can co-opt them to be fellow teachers during your driver education program. For instance, we know that 10 and 2 and 8 and 4 are now the preferred location for hands. Some of you are saying, no, by God, I'm still up here at 10 and 2, and that's where I'm always going to be. The point is this. If you look at the steering pockets on a steering wheel, your hands go right here. And that's because the thumb controls are right here to control the vehicle without actually having to look at them. All right. If you can get parents to get their hands to here and hold their kids accountable for their hands to be here, you now have another co-teacher in your class. In vehicle guide, those are the things that you're going to cover. And that, in my particular case, I would have a list of all of the lessons that we were going to cover, all of the drive routes that covered those lessons, and the assessment sheets that went with those, so that I was able to demonstrate proficiency, progression of evidence of progression, demonstrate things like, did they actually perform something, or did we not get a chance to do it, and so on. Copies of state driver's manuals, really good to have in the glove box. So let's say Bobby in the back seat saying, you know, I'm thinking I read this in a driver's manual. Pull it out, give it back to him and say, look it up, tell us while we're going down the road here. You don't have to do it. The kids can always do it. And then keep a written communication, keep every written communication that you send out to parents, copies of emails, and they don't have to be printed, but what they can be is put in a special file that is stored, that is not going to disappear from your computer. More, guide of safe in-car practices, your policy manual, indicating evidence of indicating certified and organized pattern practice we just talked about, pre-assessment was given, and so on, and your approved lesson plans. Permit check. We require students to have a permit to do learning in a vehicle with an instructor. Sometimes they forget to make a permit check. Now, there's two reasons you do make the permit check. The first one is, did they have the proper credentials? Do they have them with them? Is that permit on there with their name, their limitations, etc.? Is that there? But the second piece is, kids are wily sons of guns, and they may borrow their brother's or sister's permit just so that they can drive. And sometimes they're going to flash it in front of you. But I always look at it and check it and make sure that it's really them on that permit. And then I make a note about it on my lesson plan that day. The progress and level of competence. We use a 1 through 4 grading system. And 4 is that we recommend they buy a bus pass. I'm just kidding. But 1 is that they're proficient, but it doesn't mean that they stop practicing. It simply means at that moment in time, in this moment and location and on this drive route, the student did well. Okay. And then your liability portfolio, which you just mentioned. Student files of instruction. This is really, really good. And I don't know how y'all do it in your own district or whatever. But in our district, we had a box with file folders of the student's name all the way through for the class, and every driver ed teacher who came in. And we had 20 driver ed teachers. And so sometimes they drove with different driver ed teachers. And they would pull the file. They could look through. They could see the comments made by the instructor. But the other thing is they could see the comments made by their parents. and said, okay, we practiced this or we didn't. So then you can review that and say, okay, now I know I can't do this until we review it one time while we're out on the route. Okay. Anyway, so the files are in our program are put in by drive groups. And so we have 3 kids per drive group, and you just pull all 3 files, look them all over, start your drive. So planning, pre-assessment we mentioned about, and we've talked a little bit about those. Everything seems to be the same. So protecting yourself. Again, what got Jeffrey Meacham was no evidence of progression. And he didn't have any capability or evidence of incapability. He didn't have any evidence. And I imagine it was probably a very difficult time while he was testifying that he really couldn't answer the questions by the plaintiff. Crash records, I will tell you, I trained a lot of teachers and administrators here in Oregon. And there was a gal at Oregon City. Her name was Suze, and Sue's a great gal. But she would call me on a regular basis. She had me on speed dial, and we would chat about different things going on with her program. She said, I got this teacher who won't do this. And I said, fire him. No, I didn't say that. But I did talk to them about the idea that she needed to put him in a plan of assistance and get him working on some things. But she called me in the middle of a crash. She had been called to a scene on one of the on-ramps to the freeway, and one of her kids in a 2 lanes that were turning right onto the freeway, the kid did this and then drifted right over into this other vehicle and smashed him pretty good. And she said, what do I do? What do I do? I said, real simple. This is real simple. First of all, you call 911, you get an ambulance there. Then you call, and the second thing you do is you call your parents. You get all your parents coming because they're going to want to see where the kids were when this crash occurred. And they're going to check and see how good their kids are. And then thirdly, you take pictures and you write down things for your crash report that you're going to have to file with the state and with your own organization. And I said, the reason you call the ambulance, even if they're not going to transport, in the state of Oregon, they have a responsibility to respond to a situation, and they can do a full evaluation of your student or daughter, or excuse me, son or daughter, and see if they needed to be transported. And it's powerful. They don't charge you for showing up. They charge you for hauling you. And you don't have to be hauled, but that's a parent decision. That's not your decision as the administrator of the program. Anyway, she got through it okay. And the parent or the driver ed teacher, great driver ed teacher, it happened so fast she couldn't even grab the wheel to pull them back into their lane. Lesson plans and routes, you've got to have them. You don't have them, I'm just telling you, you're setting yourself up for some serious liability. And then evidence of care compliance. If there's a need, you take care of it. You don't just let it go. And again, your liability portfolio. You know, today we've got a lot of knowledge. We've received a lot of information, you know, and there's lots of dots that we really are taking a look at. And knowledge is good. Knowledge is a powerful tool, but it's when we have experience that we have the opportunity to put them all together and connect all the dots. And that's where, I mean, you've got a beautiful mentoring program, and Audra's going to pay you for the mentoring. My goodness, what a powerful thing. You get a chance to really help young teachers, new teachers, start developing the knowledge and the experience. And hopefully today you've been able to see the things that you need to have in place so that you can be safe whenever you do a driver ed lesson. I want to thank you for sticking with me, and I'm hoping that maybe, let me stop my share here. Okay. Maybe if there's any questions, you could put them in the Q&As, or you could put them in the chat box. So Audra,
Rich, you had a question about parallel parking on a main street and the malfeasance of that.
Okay, so if you do a parallel parking maneuver on a street in downtown Portland, my goodness, I'm thinking the kid's going to struggle because of the level of traffic, and also the unconsideration of the people who are helping you. So my suggestion is practice on a side street first. Find a place where you can do that. get proficient at that, and then go out to the main street. But don't do it the first thing, because they'll fail. And when they fail, they get frustrated and they don't want to learn anymore. So my suggestion to you is have them practice in a low risk environment. You can even do it in a parking lot with the other driver ed cars. I don't recommend that you spend too much time or spend working with other people's cars, because there's a risk that you may be filling out a crash report and sending out insurance information. So, okay.
There was a question regarding whether their school insurance covered them legally. I'll let you answer if you want to answer
Well,
first,
yeah,
and then I'll follow up.
And I will tell you this: if you're doing your job right, and you're doing what you're supposed to do, and you have all of these evidences in place, and your liability portfolio is fresh and new and complete, then the school's insurance has to cover you. Now, if you're being reckless and doing things that increase your liability, exposure to risk, then the district may still pay the claim, but at the same time, they may have to fire you because you just violated their standards and policies. Would you agree with that, Audra?
I would, and I would actually think of it as your program has insurance, your vehicles have insurance, but you don't specifically really have insurance. I mean, it's kind of like when I was a police officer, or even doing driver's education. I mean, they look at you personally when you do something. You can go out and get your own insurance, but your school will cover you up to a certain point as long as you keep all that documentation, you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. But you also have to consider the fact that there's a difference between a criminal offense and a civil offense.
That's exactly right. Yep, for sure. And the malfeasance piece becomes a criminal offense because you purposely, willfully violated the law or violated the standards that you were promised that you would keep.
Yeah, so that's why it's important that we have a level of, maintain a level of training, and make sure you record your training, make sure you keep your certificates,
Absolutely.
make sure you have
Yep.
lesson plans, or you can tell somebody what you're doing.
Yeah.
You know, if you don't have these type of things, or you don't have policies and procedures in place at your own school district, I mean, there's a different level of it, as he talked about. There's ones at your school district, there's ones at the state, there's ones, you know, at different levels, and you need to make sure that you cover yourself in all of those.
So I just wanted to show you, this is my liability portfolio of all the conferences that I've attended. The other thing that I keep, and I forgot to mention this, is that you keep a copy of the program that's in there so you can show that you, what you covered during that particular conference. And so by all means, please keep a record of that. Keep a record of this one and a program that Audra put together, and just put it in your file so that if anything ever comes up, you can say, I got training on that. This is what I know. Okay. And Doug, I'm going to make a note about that sample template for an in-car lesson plan or record of progression template form. Okay. I'll see if I can't send Audra a copy of what we have in my program, and then we can, she can distribute it as she sees fit. Any other questions?
Nothing else has come in. There's just a lot of questions about where to do parallel parking. I think it really stresses them out about parallel parking.
Well, and you know, honestly, because kids don't parallel park anymore in Oregon, they go to the mall and they pull in or they back into spaces or whatever. So we practice more time on that than we do in actual parallel parking. It's not part of the test. It's not part of the final drive assessment that the programs give. So we just said, you know what, we're not going to do it because there's so much time that comes into play for this whole thing. So.
And we have people here from Oregon, Idaho, and Utah. It is still part of the Utah test.
Right.
However, I will confirm this with the driver's licensing office. I believe that we were told the other day on one of our courses that they were okay with us doing the test between cones or between boxes, but I'll confirm that and send it out to everyone.
I think that's a great idea, because then they don't have to worry about the liability of scratching a car. when I did my test, and that was, let me see, 50 years ago. One of the things that we did is we did the parallel parking maneuver between cones. So, because they didn't want to put the police cars at risk and in jeopardy with a 15-year-old. So, all right. Any other things coming up? There's a Q&A.
You had a question. Is it better to communicate with parents as a group or individually? I know some schools do parent drives. We do parent group meetings all the time, but they're asking about individual.
So I would, you cannot over communicate with parents. And the reason you can't is because they want to know what they can practice on and make it more, make their practice time more significant with their kids. I would suggest a parent meeting. That's the way we do it in our program. Oregon requires a parent meeting for a driver education program. And if you don't have it, then you don't get your reimbursement. And so the idea of a parent meeting is powerful. And so I would strongly recommend you do it that way. I also recommend that your driver ed instructor, if they have 3 kids in the car, they talk with the parents, all 3 of them, 3 sets of them at the end of a drive, and give just a debrief and let them know what's going on. It's a great way to kind of keep it fresh with the parents so that they know what to work on. Let me see, there were 2 other questions here.
They ask if they could take the parents on a final drive with their students. Yeah, you guys are always welcome to let students or let parents do parent drives. It's a good way for them to see how you interact with the students and to see that skill level of their child. A lot of parents don't know what to do in the car with their child, and it scares them, and it makes them feel more comfortable actually if you put them in the car, because then they can see how it works and what they need to say and what they need to do or direct them. Well, and think about this. We have a very specific way we give directions to our teens. The one is at the next intersection, turn right. At the next intersection, turn left. You can ask them, what do you see in your target area? And they can tell you, well, I see traffic signals. Perfect. At those traffic signals, turn left. I don't like to cue traffic control devices because I don't want them relying on my searching and telling them there's a traffic control device up ahead. I may do it initially, but when we're in drives 3, 4, and 5, and 6, no, they're on their own to find them. They just need to identify them and tell me, okay? I'm still trying to get this down, Doug. I don't want to miss this. There's another question that just came up in Q&A. I think Moneo Drive can help with that. I'm not sure. You need to talk with the owner of the company. But there's 40 hours students need to drive for their parents or guardians. They may have a program there. You could create a Google Sheet for the parent to actually go in and fill in when they do a drive with their teen. And they are the only ones that have access. So the kid wouldn't be able to, basically, they wouldn't be able to alter that and falsify that record. So that's Google Sheets a great way to keep track of those kinds of things, and it's accessible by everybody who has a Google account. So another way that you guys can do that, there is an actual form inside of your workbooks that you got from AAA, so you can use that. Those workbooks are meant to be used online or through a classroom course, and it's a parent type thing. So students take it home and work with their parents on those activities, and there's a log sheet in it. Another good application is to use Road Ready app. It sends the parents notifications. It gives them tips on how to work with their student, and it tells them, hey, you need to drive more on rural roads versus city roads, or it gives them like different things and it tracks it for them. So there's a lot of different tracking ways. And also for those of you who don't know, we have entered into 2 new contracts since Moneo drive contract ended in Utah. You can now get a contract through Dubanet or through Driver's Ed Solutions to do scheduling software and tracking software. And I'll send that out to everyone pretty soon. Oh my gosh, Troy, I don't know that I have an answer to that. And the reason is the parents are scared spitless to drive with their kids. And I guess the best thing to do would be to have them
practice in low risk environments. Like a lot of people said, the church parking lots. Well, you know where the church parking lot is in town, and you can go and practice there on the weeknights because there's not going to be anybody. Just practice and help them and give them a parent practice plan that you can say, okay, today take them out and have them drive 5 left turns, 5 right turns. And and you can teach them the skill sets that are required for that, and then they'll be able to practice that more efficiently. Practicing without a plan is really not practicing at all. And so you can help the parents plan for that. And that's another parent communication piece that you can give to your parents. Okay.
Also, Zero Fatalities, you guys, Zero Fatalities doing a presentation today at 5 o'clock. Watch that. It is a great resource for parents. They have videos for parents to watch. They have step-by-step instruction for parents, all kinds of things. So go to their new website or watch the presentation today, and you'll be able to see all of the amazing things that can help out with parents to get more parents involved.
Okay, one last question here. Okay, so I think I need to let you guys go get your lunch because you're and you're kind of saying, I need to get out of here. I'm afraid he's going to say something that's meaningful, but honestly, Audra has my contact information. If you seriously want to talk about something that comes up and says, I need to know about these things, by all means, give me an email. Excuse me, and I would love to interact with you. I'm a retired guy that is cooling his heels right now because can't do anything else for health reasons. So I would be happy to respond. I'm not going to leave you in the dark. I do want to make one more disclaimer. I am not an attorney, and the advice I gave you today was not legal advice, but it was advice to protect you as a professional. So please consider that when you look at the next time you drive. It's like, oh my gosh, I got to write this lesson plan. You don't have to rewrite them. You can keep them from year to year. It doesn't matter. I mean, 6 drives is 6 drives, and those 6 drives, the kids are going to cover those same exact things. And if you live in a community where you can keep the same drive route, my goodness, you can use the same drive route. You don't have to recreate the wheel, and you can still have the checklist for the evidence of progression. So it's all there. You don't have to recreate anything. You just do it one time, and you're good to go. All right.
Thank you, Rich. And his contact information is in the agenda if you guys need to get a hold of him. And I have his PowerPoints and everything's recorded. So if you want to go through and watch them again, I appreciate it.
Awesome. And oh, by the way, go out and buy that book, Zoom by Istvan Banya. It's a great book. And you can even help the parents understand where they can get information and why it's important to have it at this level, this level, this level, and this level. Okay. All right. You guys take care.